The story of your amazing discoveries is well known, but still what we don't know is how it was for you to go through all these. How did you feel? And the technical detail, what it was like to draw a chart by hand without using a computer.
Well, in terms of the last question first, of course, I was one of countless thousands of other astrologers in those years drew charts without having computers, and it was pretty simple. The mathematics are not complex. You have to have three reference works. You have to have a very good atlas that shows you where the exact coordinates are of every town and village in the world. Then you have to have something called the time zone. It has to tell you what time zone everything is, and when they change daylight savings time and wartime and standard time, what date it happened and what year and when it changed back. So that's you have to check all that. And the second thing is you need what was called a table of houses, another reference book, and gave you the ascendant and the midheaven and so forth. And then the third thing that you needed was to have an ephemeris, the standard, which we of course mostly still use, though much of the time you can just use the computer to find out where the planets are. But an ephemeris still has certain advantages, having it on the written page and looking where all the planets are page after page. I used to feel that a good ephemeris of the 20th century, for example, which was when I was doing it back in the 1970s, like the ephemeris of the 20th century would be like if I had to have just one book on an island that I was, marooned, it would be that book, because it was the track of the gods, the tracks of the gods I would remember. So, as I say, the calculations weren't hard. You could, when you got good at it, you could do a good chart, calculating and drawing and everything in about 25 minutes. But it's still, now it's like 1 second. In terms of the different discoveries, I mean, I'm not sure, which discoveries you're thinking of.
The initial ones with the correspondence between perinatal
matrices and the outer planets, that one, yeah.
And the one with Prometheus, and then
yes,
axial age and...
Yes. Each one came as a kind of epiphany, with its own numinosity. It was also being, particularly in those years in the 1970s, getting the first the fact that the correlations existed at all, the way any astrologer for the first time discovers, before any person discovers that astrology has any validity at all. That was the first one. And then to see how well it worked and beautifully, and how it illuminated my life, the unfolding of my life, and that of many others. That in itself was a huge revelation, which many people have had. Then seeing the precise correlation with the 4 perinatal matrices, that was a real surprise. I didn't know what to do with it right away, but it was like, wow, look at this, Stan. I remember talking to him about it at Esalen one day, about sometime in the later 70s. The Prometheus one I got very excited about because it started as I started writing Prometheus the Awakener. It eventually grew into about a 300-page book, which I never published. I just published the shorter version, but it turned into, at one point, I was writing it when I was 28, 29, 30. When I had a lot of transits with my Saturn return, and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were all lighting up my Jupiter, Pluto, Neptune part of my chart. And it unleashed a kind of creative awakening inside me and on every level. It gave me, I mean, that was the first time I started writing out of the joy of writing. I think I was feeling I think Prometheus for me was kind of what Zarathustra was for Nietzsche. It became a symbol of transformation that I could run with, you know. And then, so that was quite exciting. But then, as you know, as you study these things, the treasures just keep unfolding. It's a boundless cave of treasures, and it's inexhaustible. And depending on how much care you're bringing to the study and your level of insight and everything, you receive more and more of a sense of exciting revelation and a blessing, really. So it's never really stopped. And so it's a sense of being, you know, I suppose blessed by the universe. Not that it's an easy path, not that one doesn't work hard, but it is the rewards, the blessings seem way more than I deserve, kind of, you know. And so in sharing it with others, I think I have some of the feeling of what some of the apostles who had the good news, you know, the gospel, like the good news, because it is good news. It's like suddenly the universe is meaningful and meaningfully focused on your life and on our earth, and any cosmos that is capable of that power of orchestration and aesthetics and the care that's going into it gives me a sense of a kind of divine benevolence that's at work, even if it can be what we call hard love, tough love at times, but it's just been a great blessing.
From your point of view, is there any contradiction between astrology and spirituality, or between astrology and different religious faith and practices?
Not at a deep level. If you have the deep level of astrological understanding and a deep a relationship to the real depths of one's religion, whatever it is, Christianity or Buddhism, there's no tension or contradiction. They actually can enrich each other. Where the conflicts occur is where one is more stuck at a I think more superficial level of dogmatism.
Is that a way to influence the course of history, or at least avoid terrible events? I am particularly worried about the upcoming Saturn-Pluto conjunction.
Yeah. It is this next Saturn-Pluto conjunction is indeed a very sobering one that there's a lot of gravity to it. But of course Saturn-Pluto can bring a correction, of course. It can bring a kind of stern reminder of what's more important. It could limit some of the human hubris or inflation. We could have something like, remember how President Nixon and the Watergate phenomenon, he overreached in his abuse of power in the early 1970s when the Uranus-Pluto was still happening, and then when Saturn squared Pluto, then the trial and the trial and the judgment, the j'accuse moment, came in 1970. 73 and 74. And so it's not impossible we'll see something like that with Trump, for example, that right now, he's in power, but a lot of things have been set in motion that when that Saturn-Pluto conjunction comes in, which is also going to hit his chart, there could be some kind of a indictment, a trial, perhaps impeachment or something. And so there can be, Saturn-Pluto can bring very deep structural changes that last, that endure, that can be very, it's not only death contractions, it also can be birth contractions, and they go together. Like if you ever, in certain moments in the perinatal journey, the birth contractions that as you're going through, they can be experienced as death contractions, like I'm dying, I'm going down. And then you find out that you're actually the mother giving birth. It's one archetypal complex, because Saturn is the contraction, but Pluto is the volcanic driving of the contraction, either to destruction, but also to creation and new life. And it's the exact same archetypal energy. It's just two sides of it. And as Nietzsche says, all pain is made sacred by birth pain. In a sense, all pain reflects birth pain. We're all in the process of being born in a new way, into a new level. And that gives me hope, even as something is dying, even as things are dying that I don't want to die, like the extinction of species. There can be new life is on the other side. And keep in mind that we've had several enormous mass extinctions before, and out of those mass extinctions came first the kind of life form that thrived on oxygen, and then after another mass extinction came the possibility of having reptiles, and then under another mass extinction brought the mammals into and our own form into evolutionary potency. So you never know what the creative universe is up to.
One of my wishes related to astrology would be to apply it early in the education, to offer the chance to approach selectively the works and life stories of people that have activated or enacted the same archetypal themes that you have. And in a couple of generations, this can lead to a process of refinement close to creating an alchemical elixir, basically creating the best conditions for the collective evolution of consciousness. What do you think about this?
That sounds like a very exciting and noble undertaking. It would need to be done with care, but I can see it as, in a way, the future of the world would be a better future if we could introduce a high form of astrology into our cosmology and into our education, just as we would be in much better condition if we were able to integrate practices of psycho-spiritual exploration and transformation into our practices, even starting quite young, as indigenous peoples do. So, yeah, that sounds exciting. I wish you good luck.
I was asking in general. In his latest film, Where to Invade Next, Michael Moore presents an almost unbelievable case where the Norwegian government seeks the advice of a philosopher on the moral issues related to the oil exploitation and the revenues from it on behalf of the people. What to do or not to do for the greater good of the society and future generations with that money. Do you think astrology can or should play such a role in the decision centers of our society regarding the future?
Such a role as, you mean that taking that into account when you're making the decision about what would be the best thing for Norway and
for the human race?
For the human race. So you're not speaking anymore about just the Norway situation, but just
an example.
Oh yeah, yeah. Again, it has to be. Astrology is going to be as helpful and valuable as the level of consciousness that is using it. So a person, I mean, you could have an oil billionaire using his own private astrologer who he pays lots of money to be on a retainer fee, and he uses that to maximize his profits and so forth. So that's using the astrology, but not necessarily for the good of the earth, or how to make the most money on the stock market, make other people lose money so that I gain money, that kind of thing. So I think that life and the cosmos will not permanently support the abuse of such spiritual treasures as astrology. It'll come back at one. You can think that you can manipulate it, but you can't. You'll find out that the archetypes had something else in mind as to how they were going to come through. They will come through, but not necessarily the way you predict. And so that's why, in some ways, astrology will always evade or elude attempts at manipulation of it.
To appropriate it.
To appropriate it, yeah. It'll be like, it's like trying to control water and air, you know. This.
If you had the chance to have a 1-hour meeting with a famous astrologer of all times, who would you choose and what do you ask him?
I don't know if I would like to have an hour-long conversation. I don't know if I'd have something to ask. If it was an astrologer from the past, I'd like to first find out more how they were making their decisions, and then I'd also like to share what we have learned, which I think they might like to know, and so I see it as a conversation of mutual enrichment, whether it be with a Dane Rudyard or a Ptolemy or Lily or whoever it might be. Kepler would be an interesting one to have it with.
If you would be to meet the golden fish from the fairy tales, the one who can fulfill 3 wishes, what would you ask him?
For the 3 wishes, I'll need some long thought about that, and I imagine one of the responses is, may all the wishes I ever request always be fulfilled. That would not be allowed as one of the answers. That sounds like Aladdin and the genie. I'm not wise enough for that question right now. Thank you, though.
If you were offered the chance to spend some time with an archetype, which one would you choose, and maybe what would you ask for?
You know, truly, I feel like I spend time with every one of the archetypes every day, you know. And each one is always speaking to me, and I feel their presence, and, you know, You just have to be awake to it, but Aphrodite's there, and Jupiter's here, and Saturn's over there, and they're always, and I'm swimming in Neptune land all the time, and so I suppose you're asking about the kind of experience I have had in certain non-ordinary states of consciousness where I've had like a direct experience of,
right.
Kind of like seeing Prometheus or Aphrodite or Saturn. Usually in none of those cases was it a conversation. It was more like a visitation,
of its realm.
Yeah, and the cosmos that it's many faces, and so it was more of an epiphany, a revelation, a kind of encounter, but it wasn't like sitting down and having a conversation, particularly like that. They're too big. They're high gods, I was just very excited to be looking up at its grandeur.
Given your life experience, maybe you can give what are the most important 3 things that you learned in this lifetime?
Oh, that's more than I could come up with in a short notice.
Just give us one.
I suppose trusting that one has a purpose in life, a daimon, a gift that is yours, that you follow, that you cultivate, that you listen to, and it will be your way into the center of life that will flow through you, and to have that confidence even when things are dark, when there doesn't seem to be a way, or when one's to recognize that even a period in which everything is being blocked or seems meaninglessly oppressive is actually meaningful, and that it is part of a larger process, and to trust that larger process, that's a big one. That even hell is a part of a process. It's an archetypal domain that will eventually open up into something bigger. It's when you're in it, it will always last. You'll never be out of it, and that's a very convincing place. But it's just one cosmos inside you, and there's many others that are still to unfold if you can bear with it. That's a big one. I like. I think it was was it Huxley who said it, or Houston Smith told me he asked somebody, and I think it was Huxley, Aldous Huxley, something like what you asked, and he said towards the end of his life, it's like try to be a little kinder. Being kind is very important. It's an underrated virtue in our time. Try and be present for each moment, and take the joy in each day that is provided. Kiss the joy as it flies, as Blake says. So those are a few thoughts.
Yeah.
If I had, maybe towards the end of my life, I'll have wiser things to say.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I very much enjoyed our time together.